everyone, and welcome to Tony's Comic Spotlight. In this weekly episodic series, I spotlight some of the best comics put to print. In this week's episode, we celebrate the first appearance of Eric Draven, the Crow, by shining the spotlight on the 8-page story featured in Caliber Presents issue number 1, as well as issue number 1 of the first solo series featuring the Crow in The Crow number 1, both from 1989. If you are enjoying the content, please feel free to like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring the bell to be notified of our latest videos. Feel free to leave a comment as well. I hope you enjoy the videos. And now, on to our featured story. Prologue. The story begins with a man named Mr. Jones who has just stolen a piece of expensive electrical equipment from a household. Then a tricycle rolls out in front of him, so he looks down and then looks back at a ghostly figure. He drops the equipment and the figure asks him if he has his attention. In a rage, Mr. Jones demands that he pays money for the equipment. The figure tells him that Shelby the Giant told him he knows who T-Bird is. Mr. Jones gets enraged whilst the figure names 4 names: Tom Tom, Top Dollar, Fun Boy, and Tintin. Mr. Jones screams in a rage and stabs the figure. The figure merely pulls the knife out without feeling pain, which frightens Mr. Jones. He hands the knife back to Mr. Jones and asks if he wants to try again. The figure begins to explain how he found out about this. Mr. Jones replies saying that Shelby won't roll on him, to which the figure pulls out some pliers and tells him that he cut off 3 of Shelby's fingers and made him eat them. So Mr. Jones, full of fear, tells the figure everything. The figure grasps Mr. Jones' face and tells him to tell them he's coming. Sudden change of atmosphere has a young gentleman on a train looking at the beautiful countryside, and he spots a beautiful white horse that is running alongside the train. The gentleman smiles and the horse begins to run towards him, but then the man realizes there's a barbed wire fence ahead of the horse. The horse runs into it and gets tangled and mutilated by the wire. The man begins to cry. Then a crow appears next to him and tells him that he shouldn't have looked. A skeletal figure appears and asks him for his ticket. The figure was having a daydream and he clutches his head in anger, tears falling from his face. Book 1. Pain. In the dead of night, the figure walks in the ghostly moonlight. He is known as the Crow. In the ghetto lies a house with a large window. Inside of the window, the Crow is watching out of the window. Something is plaguing his mind. Screams, sobbing, men's voices so grim and evil he hears their names: T-Bird, Tom Tom, Tintin, Fun Boy, and Top Dollar. He hears voices that have been gone for a year. In the street, 3 men meet up, 2 of them selling a weapon to the other whose name is Tintin. They give the weapon to Tintin and he kills an elderly woman with it. He then kills the 2 sellers as the sirens cry in the distance. Tintin slips into an alleyway unnoticed, but the Crow is waiting there for him. He asks the Crow why he is painted up, to which the Crow retorts a funeral march. This angers Tintin and he fires his weapon at the Crow. It skims his head and the Crow shoots Tintin in the arm, forcing him to drop his weapon. He asks Tintin if he remembers a night a year ago with a broken down car, pain, madness, and a man and a woman. Tintin begins to panic as he remembers. He knows the Crow was a man they killed a year ago, along with a woman. Despite Tintin's pleas, the Crow kills him. He then begins to remember certain things from the past. He returns home and surrounds himself with pictures of a woman and ties a spent shell in his hair. The scene changes to a criminal meeting in which a lot of arguing is going on. Top Dollar asserts his dominance over the rest of the crew. They spot something moving outside the window. Someone goes to check and the Crow shoots him in the head. He begins slaughtering all of the criminals. He stops when he gets to Top Dollar. He asks him if he remembers him and Top Dollar doesn't answer. He begins bartering his life for drugs and money. After a fit of rage, he screams that he does remember. The Crow shoots him in the face. After the Crow leaves, he finds a cat named Gabriel, who puts him in a box, takes him to his house, and opens it for someone he is talking to, a woman named Shelley, who has died along with the Crow a year ago. He remembers she always wanted the cat. The Crow begins to cry as he remembers how he proposed to Shelley. While they were decorating their house, the Crow remembers that his name is Eric. Eric is daydreaming again, thinking of Shelley, but the Crow from the previous daydream tells him he doesn't need to be here. He carries on. The Crow goads Eric, calling him an idiot. Then Shelley is shot in the head by the skeletal figure from the previous dream. Eric wakes up, Eric screams, cries, and bangs his head on the wall. All he wants is pain and hate, but not fear. Never fear. Fear is for the enemy. Fear and bullets. The Crow is based on a comic book which was inspired by two tragedies. In 1981, 21-year-old James O'Barr was drawing combat manuals in the Marines when he decided to start The Crow. He hoped it would be a healthy way of the death of his fiancée, who had been killed by a drunk driver. I tried all the typical angst-ridden outlets like substance abuse and going to clubs or parties every night and just basically trying to keep yourself numb for as long as a period of time as possible, O'Barr told the Baltimore Sun in 1994. Eventually I was smart enough to realize that that was a dead end, so I thought perhaps putting something down on paper I could exercise some of that anger. Pivotal to his comic book's plotline was another tragedy O'Barr heard about. A couple killed over an engagement ring. I thought it was outlandish. A $30 ring, 2 lives wasted. He said in a book about the production called The Crow the Movie. That became the beginning of the focal point in the idea that there could be a love so strong that it could transcend death, that it could refuse death, and this so would not rest until it could set things right. There was interest in turning the comic into a movie early on. The Crow comic book debuted on February 1st, 1989. Shortly after the second issue came out, O'Barr, who at the time was doing auto body work, was approached by a young director who was interested in buying the rights to The Crow for a one-time lump sum. All rights, all media in perpetuity. O'Barr said in The Crow the Movie, but the money was pretty good considering I was going to do it. But his friends convinced him to consult with a Hollywood agent, who advised O'Barr against selling the rights to the comics for a lump sum. Then right when the third issue was coming out, O'Barr met writer John Shirley and producer Jeff Most, who were eager to adapt The Crow into a movie. Their enthusiasm convinced me that the film would be done correctly, O'Barr said. Even though it was for far less than what I had previously been offered, I wasn't selling out my copyright, and it was the best chance of the film turning out to be something I'd want to see. I just went with my instincts. There's the persistent rumor that Eric Draven's makeup was inspired by Alice Cooper or Kiss, and it's a rumor that O'Barr denies. At a comics convention in 2009, O'Barr said that the Crow's look came from a marionette mask, which he saw painted on a theater in London. I thought it'd be interesting to have this painful face with a smile forcibly drawn on. Writer John Shirley and producer Jeff Most made some changes to O'Barr's anti-hero. Shirley and Most got to work right away adapting The Crow into a script. They made a few changes, downplaying Eric's drug use and bringing the love story to the fore. They also made The Crow an actual animal, not just Eric's psyche, as it is in the comics that spoke to Eric telepathically. While Shirley worked on the script, Most took the street treatment and the comics and went about shopping the screenplay. Eventually, independent producer Ed Pressman signed on to help make the movie, and for the next 2 years, Shirley honed the script. He added an older brother for Sarah, a version of a character from the comics, a young girl with a drug addict for a mother who befriends Eric and Shelley, and turned the Skull Cowboy, a manifestation of Eric's mental anguish that appears 3 times in the comics, into a guide. Eventually, O'Barr thought the creative team had gone too far with their changes, so he created a 10-page outline explaining his characters' motivations to get them back on track. Not long after, horror writer David J. Shaw came on board to do a rewrite. He told Pressman that Eric Draven would be a gothic rock and roll Terminator. Shaw cut back on the number of villains, giving the remaining ones a clear hierarchy, and added Devil's Night as the motivating factor behind the initial attack on Eric and Shelley, just to give the villains a more hysteric agenda. He said in The Crow the Movie, making that decision also grounded the movie in Detroit, a city that regularly experienced fires and mayhem the night before Halloween. Producers knew who they wanted to direct and star. Pressman had Alex Proyas, an Australian director who at that point had helmed music videos and commercials but no features in mind, to direct The Crow. Though Proyas was very much in demand in Hollywood, he was waiting for the right project, and The Crow was it. He signed on in 1991. The producers first looked at musicians to fill the role of Eric Draven. Among them, Charlie Sexton, a rocker from Texas, but ultimately their first choice was Brandon Lee. At that point, Lee, son of famed actor martial artist Bruce Lee, had appeared in a few films but hadn't had a breakout role yet. We had considered some more established actors, and we were concerned that some of these actors did not have the athletic ability. Pressman said in The Crow the movie, other people had the athletic ability but not the acting talents. Brandon combined it all. When Brandon walked into his office, it was an immediate flash. We knew we had our Eric Draven that instant. James O'Barr makes a cameo in The Crow. He's the looter who steals a television in the aftermath of the explosion at Gideon's pawn shop. Lee asked for one character to be removed. Once Lee signed on to star in The Crow, he read the comic book. After the script was written, Alex Proyas and I went back to the comic book and tried to find the beats of the story that didn't make it into the script. At one point during production, Proyas took Lee's feedback seriously and often incorporated his changes into the script. That included cutting one supervillain, an Asian character, out to steal Eric's powers, whom Lee thought was a stereotype. The cast and crew worked long, grueling hours in the rain at night on the set of The Crow, which was played by misfortunes almost from the start. In 1993, a carpenter was seriously injured on set when the crane he was working on hit live power lines. That night, an equipment truck caught on fire. Later, a sculptor who had worked on the set for just a few days drove through the plaster shop after he was let go. A construction worker accidentally drove a screwdriver through his hand. Then in March, a storm destroyed some of the sets. On March 31, 1993, the production was filming a flashback sequence that showed how Eric died. As he walked into the apartment he shared with Shelley to find her being raped and beaten by Top Dollar's henchmen, Fun Boy would pull out his .44 Magnum and shoot him, according to People magazine. The script of The Crow called for a close-up of the loaded weapon. The crew, following standard procedure, used dummy bullets, which were nothing more than bullets without gunpowder. When the close-up was finished, the gun was unloaded, then reloaded with blanks. Blanks sound as loud as real bullets, but when they were fired, only the harmless cardboard wadding with which they are packed is ejected from the gun. This time, though, the action was far from benign. Massey pulled the trigger and Lee sunk to the ground, a hole the size of a quarter in his lower right abdomen. The crew didn't realize that Lee was injured until Proyas called cut and the actor didn't get up. He was rushed to the hospital, but doctors couldn't save him. Lee died later that afternoon. He was just 28 years old. It took some time to figure out what had happened, but according to the Telegraph, both the dummy bullets and the blanks used on the production had hastily been fabricated by taking out the gunpowder from real bullets. Because of the time pressure crew members were under, the lead tip of the dummy bullet became lodged in the barrel of the gun and pushed out by the blank cartridge, scratched the bottom of the shopping bag before perforating Lee's navel, and managed to puncture the stem of the aorta where it branches to provide blood supply to the legs. After the accident, Paramount, which had agreed to distribute the movie, dropped out, leaving the film in limbo. Miramax eventually picked it up. Producers, with permission from Lee's family, wanted to finish the film, and after a 6-week bereavement period, the cast and crew returned to Wilmington to complete filming of The Crow. No criminal charges were ever filed in Lee's death, but his mother, Linda Lee Caldwell, did file a lawsuit against the producers and production company, which was eventually settled. In 2005, Massey spoke out about the accident for the first time. It absolutely wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't even supposed to be handling the gun until we started shooting the scene and the director changed it. He said afterward, I just took a year off, I went back to New York and didn't do anything. I didn't work. What happened to Brandon was a tragic accident. I don't think you ever get over something like that. O'Barr donated most of his profits from the film to charity. O'Barr bought his mom a car and a surround sound system for himself, then donated the rest. I was really good friends with Brandon, so it just felt like blood money to me, he said at a comics convention in 2009. I didn't want to profit at his expense, and I kept that secret for as long as I could. It's not charity if you get credit for it. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to watch this spotlight as we shine the spotlight on the first appearance of Eric Draven the Crow in Caliber Presents #1 and the first issue of the ongoing series, The Crow #1. If you're enjoying the content, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell for future notifications. And coming up next week, we're going to go back to the 60s, and we're going to spotlight the first Silver Age appearance of Captain America. Captain America returns from a block of ice, and we're going to shine the spotlight on Avengers issue #4. So that should be pretty cool. So until next time, everyone take care, be safe, and God bless. See ya.